How would you explain Kundalini awakening to a physicist or someone who studies quantum mechanics? Larry and I both were studying to become physicists when we got the calling to do other things. He went to be with Bubba. That's right, Larry. I dropped out of uni to become a jazz musician, a very noble calling, a decision I never regretted. One of the fundamental things in science is that they now say that the observer is part of the experiment. That's a fundamental idea in science nowadays. If you are performing an experiment, you can't leave yourself out of it. So consider this. It doesn't matter how big the telescope is that you might build, and you can build a telescope that's so powerful that you can see so far into the universe that you can see right back to the beginning of time. The question is, what do you put in front of it? A human eye. So the observer is always part of the experiment in science. There's the eye, of course, but behind that is the conscious awareness that's taking in whatever it is that we're looking at in a scientific experiment, because we're talking about science at the moment. One thing I just wanted everyone to try, this is like a dharana, so I just want everyone to just try it. At the moment, we're looking at a screen. And the idea is that there's an aspect of your sight which is right out there where the screen is. But you can sort of trace the process of sight back through to the eyeball, because we know that whatever is on that screen is actually being projected on the back of your eyeball. So if you go from the screen to your eyeball and take your awareness into your eyeball, and then behind that is the conscious awareness. It's the part of you that takes in what you're seeing. Now, this process of your conscious awareness going all the way out to the screen, I'm saying also has a corresponding process which enables your sight to see this way. Rather than to say, I see, you're sort of saying, see, I. Okay, so that's one of the aspects that we're following in yoga. So there's just another idea. And in science, they have a thing called a thought experiment. And I looked it up last night on Wikipedia, and a thought experiment is an idea that goes back, several hundred years in science, and very famously was something that Albert Einstein used to come up with a special theory of relativity. And what did he say? It's amazing what he says in terms of yoga. He said, if I was chasing a beam of light in the laboratory of my mind, what would I observe? And through that, he came up with special relativity and then general relativity, which sound like these great, big, enormous scientific concepts. But when we use the GPS on our phone every single day, those ideas are baked into it, and they enable us to know, turn left at the next corner. So they're things that we're using every day. To get to this idea of Kundalini awakening with these few ideas that I've sort of used to kind of set it up, this idea of taking the power that is in your senses and turning it towards the conscious awareness. Now, if you're like me or anyone else in the 21st century, I put my phone down and there's a part of my mind that wants to pick it up again and look at it. And that incredible sort of magnetism drawing my senses out, saying, what am I saying about myself? What are other people saying about me? What's happening in the world? I don't know, all that stuff. It just goes on and on and on. It's like a magnetism drawing you out to your senses. But in yoga, the awakening is when you start to ask a question about the conscious awareness. And then, in fact, I kind of feel that this process of saying I see turning into see I is when you're doing that. And after a while, if you are doing some practice, keeping certain types of company, and following your sadhana, you start to feel that same sort of magnetism that wants to draw you out to the object of your senses. You start to feel that same sort of magnetism operating inside your senses to do this business of looking at the conscious awareness, which is behind the telescope looking out into the universe in science. That magnetism is what is Kundalini.